Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duval, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who has been dreaming of putting in a backyard pool and then removing all its ladders.
What? Jim Longo.
That's a thing. That's a thing that you can do in this humor factory. We'll get there. We'll get there.
Oh my goodness.
Did you never have an ant farm?
I did not, no.
Oh, okay. Because, or even just like ants in a magnifying glass. I'm not a psychopath, I promise. But,
I save spiders when I can.
I also do, as an adult, I'm very I'm not crazy about spiders, but, find a spider. It's like, oh, I can put you out of the house, little man. Or if you're in the basement, fine, go ahead. It's the basement. Knock yourself out. But anyway.
What are we talking about?
What are we talking about? Well, welcome back. First of all, thanks. Last week we ran a Discord interviews episode. Tim doesn't even know that.
No, I don't. What? I am so out of Discord. Sorry, everybody, but I have not been able to keep up.
So Biostats and Calamity Nolan interviewed Ben from Iowa.
Oh, amazing.
And we actually have a couple others. So if we have other breaks this summer or whatever, I'll put them in. We actually got a second Discord Game Club from Mark Garcia.
I have to go listen to them.
Yep. So it's just talking about in this case, Ben does some he does an audio only let's play, which I guess is probably in podcast form itself, where he's doing it and has to do a little bit with mental health, and it's a fun interview and worth listening to if that's your thing. I put a little stinger at the front saying, hey, this isn't us, but if you're interested in this, here it is, and that, so that I will put those kind of stingers on when we release those, so people know. If that's not something they want, then that's also fine. So you'll know. Sometimes it won't be that. We also released our big mailbag episode, which had a fun reimagining of how to structure the podcast. So for those who listen to that, I hope that was funny for you. We have an email about that, so we'll talk about that there. So
people found it.
If people found the tiny little 30-minute Easter egg that was after the credits.
We ran an interview?
We ran an interview the week before that, which was with Michel Ancel, which we recorded actually a couple of months ago now. And that was fantastic. It was really fun as with any of our interviews, it's like, could we just keep talking for another few hours? Just capture for posterity. That was a fascinating conversation. And I'm still mind blown about we just built this whole 3D tool set and animation tool and audio tool and etc. all in the game engine, all in the game, which is a little similar to what we did with Starfighter, but we definitely didn't have modeling in there. We did that in a another program like you do. So it was really wild to hear that. I mean, even their phonemes, for the mouths moving and stuff, maybe morph targets. I don't know. We didn't talk about the specifics, but was like, wow, you did everything in your tool, crazy. But that's kind of his background. So that's kind of how he had done stuff prior to that. And I guess that's kind of his ethos. I don't think that's the way they do things anymore, but still pretty wild, weird, wild stuff.
Yeah, that was a good one. But we're back talking about The Sims.
We are back to talk about The Sims. For those who didn't catch the whole pulling out the ladders in the backyard pool, I can't believe you're not aware of that. I guess you're pretty sim blind.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of ringing a bell, but there were a lot of stories about people walling Sims.
Walling Sims into small, 5 by 5 areas and things like that, or one grid square. Yeah, very common. You make a door to a bathroom and then you just remove the door and put a wall in there instead. It's there were a lot of things people did to mess with the simulation, but we'll get to that. I would love to hear what cruel ways Tim will treat his Sims in the future.
I don't know.
Because if I know anything about Tim, he is a cruel taskmaster. This game came out in 2000. There are 2 games from that year that we played on the cast. Final Fantasy IX, way back in the early days. I think that was our 3rd game ever. And Deus Ex, which was a little bit later. Not terribly later. Both of those are quite a ways back at this point. So it's good to play another game from 2000. It's one of our light years, a year we haven't played a ton of games in. You ready for me to just rattle off a bunch of games?
I'm ready. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we have, these are not in any particular order because who has time for that? But Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 and SSX, I kind of put together as, games in that kind of, do the sportsy thing with combos. There was Perfect Dark on the consoles and N64 specifically, and The Operative No One Lives Forever, a personal favorite, although NALF 2 is superior. The first one was pretty good. It didn't quite nail the tone, but it was pretty dang good. Baldur's Gate 2, Vagrant Story, and Diablo 2 in the sort of RPG space. Vagrant Story, another one I'd love to play again someday. Totally great game. Banjo-Tooie, Spyro Year of the Dragon, and Majora's Mask in the sort of, they're not all kind of platformers, but that kind of action-adventure space. The weird ones, Crazy Taxi, probably the weirdest on the list. And then I have Counter-Strike, Thief 2 as another couple games that came out that year. Those aren't really similar, but they are at least first person. So there's some similarity. I guess No One Lives Forever shares a lot of DNA with those kinds of games as well, just in terms of what you're doing, but it has a very different feel. So yeah, those are some games we pulled out from the year. And if you go back and listen to the Deus Ex or Final Fantasy IX, actually maybe not the Final Fantasy IX, but definitely the Deus Ex one, we talk about, this year in games in that way. It was the year of the PS2. In particular, SSX was a launch title, so it was late in the year, however, and there were not a lot of launch titles for the PS2. I remember might have been like 4, something like that, 4 or 5, not a ton. So that's why there's still a lot of PlayStation 1 titles on the list, because those were still releasing well into this year, and some actually I think bled into the year following, because the PlayStation 1 was a huge system, lots of units sold. So that's the year. You have memories of this time?
Yeah, vaguely. It looks like Majora's Mask also maybe was this year.
I think I mentioned it.
Oh, you did? Sorry, I missed it. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of looking at the top, what other games sold well, and Sims was one of them for sure.
Yeah.
It looks like it was almost 84 million collectively dollars.
Wow.
So... yeah, does it have units here? No, just revenue.
That's a big game. That's a big game, though, for 2000.
Yeah, and that was number 8, so Pokemon was killing it at this point.
When has Pokemon not been killing it?
Yeah.
Evergreen.
Yeah,
is that the number 1 franchise?
No, it's actually Mario, but it's number 2.
It's number 2, yeah. And then
I was just going to segue to that. Yeah, actually, Tetris is number 2. Sorry, Pokemon's number 3. So I was just looking up at the top revenue for all franchises of all time, because I knew Sims was on here, and it's number 9. I'll just rattle through them very quickly. So 10 is Assassin's Creed, which I was surprised to hear. See,
there's a number of them, however. So
there's a lot of them.
They've been building up for a while. Yeah.
Both Sims and Assassin's Creed are basically 200 million plus, and that's units. And then Legos 8, Minecraft. Let's see, Legos 8 at also 200 million plus. Minecraft at 300 plus. FIFA 325 plus. Grand Theft Auto at 405 plus is number 5. Number 4 is Call of Duty, 425 plus. And then that's number 4. Number 3 is Pokemon at 480 million plus sales.
Units,
units. And then 520 million plus for Tetris related products. And then number 1, by a long shot, Mario.
Yeah, it has probably
832 million plus.
Yeah, I was gonna say it probably has as many titles as the rest of the list put together.
Yeah.
Have
So
the Mario name
it's
on
almost like it's almost like they're not playing fair. At that
Yeah.
point. It's like Mario. It's like saying, I don't know. It's like saying video game.
it. Yeah, right.
or
Well,
something,
it's wild to think of games that are charting a different path. Right. I mean, those top 3 are sort of low
Very
system
similar to
requirement
each other.
games.
Oh,
You know?
I see.
You know, right? I mean, it's Nintendo systems, of course, because Tetris. I mean, lately Tetris is on other stuff, but it originated in the West. You know, on the Game Boy, I believe, right? So so you've got 3 big Nintendo sellers right there, and then you've got, I think you said Call of Duty, and you're like, so the realistic stuff doesn't come in until 4th. The much more expensive to make games.
Yeah,
and it's like 4th, 5th, and 10th, I think, on your list. So I might have missed another one.
Yeah,
in there
FIFA.
Oh, FIFA.
So,
Yeah, FIFA's also pretty realistic, right? Sports games are kind of a totally different thing in my mind, because they bring in that specific fan base. But
it's a really interesting list, though, because when you look at like Lego's, pretty sprawling, but very, very, all the games are playing within the same pool largely. But Minecraft, it's like, there's a few ancillary titles, but largely that's focused around one game, right?
Yeah.
And then I think the interesting thing, Assassin's Creed kind of speaks for itself to some degree. It's just like you said, there's a lot of offerings for them. But the reason I wanted to bring it up is because Sims has only had 4 main title games and a lot of expansion packs. So it's like, so it's been around since 2000, but as far as like everything on this list, Mario's high because, there's everything from tennis to racing to platforming to, it's like, it's a real brand.
Yeah.
Sims is definitely a brand, but it also, and there's been some ancillary titles on different platforms and things that are different styles of play. But, to get up to 200 plus million sales with just the titles they've had is kind of my point, right?
And
expansion packs are a big part of that because they just, I assume they're counting those in the numbers.
Oh, I would think that would have to be
because there's probably like 100 of those,
Right. Yeah.
So it's just a different model. It's just interesting to see on this list how, like you said, the different models, not even just the aesthetic of the game, but just the business models right, of each game are pretty different.
I mean, and Sims and Minecraft are the only ones on that list that have no real victory condition, right? They don't end.
You're right.
I mean, I guess there is a mode in Minecraft where you can go to the Nether or whatever, and
you can slay the Nether dragon and things like that.
There's a way to quote unquote win, but that wasn't the initial thing for sure. That was added later. I think for players who wanted that, and I've never played it that way. So like it's
and I don't even know if you get, I don't know, maybe these days you do, but even if you do that, I don't think it's like you get a game over screen or anything, right? It's
I don't think so.
Keep playing. So it's like, it gives you a goal, but it's very self-motivated goal.
Yeah. I mean, technically the Elder Scrolls do the same thing, right? So it's, those games don't end either, the Assassin's Creed sort of do, sort of don't. Like, there's definitely a main story that does, and you can go back and do lots of the side stuff if you want. But I would still put them in the bucket of a game with an ending, because when I play them, I generally exhaust all the stuff I want to do before I finish the main story. So maybe that's just a personal perspective on those games. But I wonder what other people share it. Yeah, cool. Wow. Number 9. That's a lot of units. That's a lot of units of Little Computer People, which is an antecedent game from, I think, 1985. I should have opened a wiki page for that one, which is a similar sort of simulation game, although it was more like Seaman than it is like The Sims, because you basically just can turn it on and what, like a Tamagotchi, you just kind of watch your guy. Interestingly, I think every disc was unique. That each little computer person was different, which would be difficult to pull off
wild
today. I mean, I'm sure there's a way to do it, and I'm sure there's a blockchain company out there somewhere who will sell you the way to do it. But in all seriousness,
there's no commentary in that.
No, not at all. There's no snideness. I've never snide him. There is, that was a real feat, I'm sure, to pull off. I don't even know how I would go about doing that in a 1985 game. I read that may be apocryphal. I was looking into it a little bit today. I was like, wasn't there a game that was just a guy and it was a sort of
what's it called?
It's called Little Computer People, and it was on the Amiga and maybe the Atari ST or something like that.
Oh yeah, look at that. That's wild.
Yeah, and it was like a side cutaway of a house, and you had your little computer person in that house who would it won some awards at the time because people thought it was like, wow, this is really revolutionary. I did read a quote, if you would actually say who the designer was, but he was saying, yeah, basically all of the games I worked on were like, you can see it in later games because at that time nobody knew what a game was, right? We were
David Crane.
Is that? Yeah, that's not who I'm thinking of.
As designer, but he's old Atari Activision, like he's. Yeah, I'll look for other people.
I'm gonna look it up now.
Rich Gold is the other person.
Rich Gold is actually the one I was thinking of. Yeah.
Okay.
And he kind of came up with it, and then he got together with David Crane. He made it so it would be unique. David Crane
is Pitfall.
That's wild. Yeah. So that's kind of how it happened. It's really wild. It's sort of it's
good
funny.
Call out. It's good. It's good you mentioned this.
Yeah. I was glad to find. I knew that there was something. I'm in my mind. It was Tiny Computer People, but I tracked it down. It was even on the Famicom in Japan with the disc add-on, I guess, which was like a sort of like the Atari had a souped-up version that was like a more real computer. I guess the Famicom had an add-on that let you do that as well. But yeah, it's definitely like a very early version of The Sims, and Will Wright did, in fact, play Little Computer People and asked Rich Gold for some feedback on The Sims when they were developing it. So
nice.
So we are not going to play Little Computer People, and I should add that to play this game, we had to go to Abandonware.
Yeah.
Because it's difficult to find otherwise. If you go to myabandonware.com and dig around for The Sims, you want the RIP version of it and not the sort of big download button, which is what Tim's like, it's not working for me. And it's you don't want to. They sometimes don't really foreground the thing that you actually want really well on some of these sites, but the comments sections tend to be gold for like actually being helpful. I think they have a pretty good community over there because I think they police it. So no commentary there either. All right, well, let's move on to the game proper. I think this is definitely a storied franchise. It does kind of grow out of The Sims and or rather SimCity and also an earlier Will Wright title, Raid on Bungling Bay, where he got really, really interested in what all so it was basically a war game where you were, I think, flying planes over to do this raid on this enemy island or enemy area. But he got really into like simulating the like the troop movements and the supply chains and whatever. So he got really into like the deeper simulation of Bungling Bay, which was a game that's 10 years before The Sims probably. And he really was like into that, and sort of it was always his goal to get back to people as the object of his simulation, and not cities. So this is when he was finally able to do it under Maxis, which I think was bought around that time by EA. It might have been a little bit after.
I thought that it was before The Sims, but you might be right.
Yeah, I don't remember, and I'm going to look that up too because it's probably important to know. Let's see, it was Looks like it was bought by EA in 1997. Yeah, so there you go. So
Yeah,
it was EA by
my
then.
memory is so bad at so many things,
Mm-hmm.
but certain things I don't know.
You're good with the computer history, honestly.
Selective memory.
You do remember a lot about games that I forget, to be honest. You know, we were talking earlier.
You remember things you care about?
Then I care about far too much, Tim.
Yeah, maybe
so.
And don't tell Jen I said that, because things that I forget that I should remember.
Okay, well, if you let me know your anniversary date at some point, I'll keep you abreast, so you don't get in trouble.
April 1st, and that's not.
Of course, it is. All right. Well, I will be.
I will never forget that.
Okay,
but it's hilarious. Sorry, that's a side. So you were saying.
I was saying this is where he was going, and I was just going to start turning to the game proper. So we, I guess it sounds like we took different paths into the game. I kind of expected you to take the tutorial path, but you have a different approach for how you play games for the podcast. I went and read enough of the manual to go, oh, cool, there's an in-game tutorial. I'll play that. And I played that, and then I kept playing it. So that was how I started. What did you do?
Yeah, I mean, I skipped all that, or I didn't even know it existed. I don't think I always did this for the podcast, but I have been over the last couple of years. It's so funny that I can actually say few years of the podcast, and that's actually accurate. So, because it's been a long time. Yeah, it is. How long? We've been 8.5. Oh my goodness. Are you kidding me? What are we doing here? Anyway, I mean, just for a day-to-day job, you know how much I love playtesting and just the concept of fresh eyes. So yeah, as a little bit of behind the scenes, and I talked about it with Final Fantasy Tactics as well. I did eventually read the manual kind of halfway through the series. But I like to start off by, I think I mentioned it during Final Fantasy Tactics, I like the discovery part. So, and I also want to stress test to see like how usable these older games are from the beginning, right? Like how manual as a crutch were they? You know what I mean? Dependent were they? And so I was actually surprised with this one, though. We'll talk about it as we go, interface wise, which is not the most exciting conversation, but interface and control wise, for these sorts of isometric games, there's become by now some pretty consistent, designs that we just kind of everyone uses, and we didn't have those at this time. So there's definitely some weird camera stuff. The camera object manipulation stuff that's very custom and specific to this game. But I did find them out without reading the manual eventually. Yeah, and it reminds me
of Populous, or something like that, where you're like, yeah, this was before we knew how to do this. I mean, Populous being an example of like, oh, this was the first. Like, they had no idea,
exactly,
and they had weird icons,
wasn't there, right? Like, so they had to work around things that not every mouse had, even. So
yeah, sure,
So I just went straight to. You should talk about yours because yours sounds really fascinating. But I just went straight to the main menu. I was thinking about creating from scratch, but I assumed my first family was going to fail in some way. So I'll maybe make one from scratch later. Cause I think I'll have the opportunity. I just chose the Pleasants, I think is their last name. And I just chose
Donald Pleasants, or
not the smallest house. Yeah. Not the smallest house, but like the pretty small, like real, like modest. I think it was just 3 rooms.
Yeah, it's like a modest family dwelling.
Yeah, and I've already added on to it and stuff. But which one of my topics we'll hit as we go. But yeah, so I'm just that family, and then I guess apparently the families from the other houses in the neighborhood will come over. As they clearly are, and I want you to talk about Bob Newbie because I want to talk about Bob Newbie.
Okay.
But so what did you do?
Yeah, so I started with the tutorial house
Social
because
experiment.
yes, I just jumped in with the tutorial house, which is at 7 Sim Lane, and it is in fact Bob Newbie. Is that a Bob Newhart reference? I don't know. He's a little balding, could be.
Yeah.
He's a bit of a schlub. Bob Newbie, and then shortly into the tutorial, Betty Newbie. Very suburban names for sure. So because I didn't want to spend a lot of time looking at the manual to figure out how to play. I mean, like you, but I did want some direction because the only other experience I have with the Sims franchise is with the PlayStation 2 version, which we can come back to later. But my sort of short review is I think it's kind of sucks the fun out of it because of how they restructured the game. So it's sort of console edition of The Sims. I also understand why they might have made those choices due to the limited nature of consoles versus PCs in terms of memory and disk. No disk on the PS2, for example. So no hard drive, I mean. So there's definitely reasons why you do it, but there's also a whoops to me. But anyway, so I took Bob and Betty, and the tutorial is actually really short. It's all about here's how you interact with the world. Here's what the various buttons that do in the bottom left corner. Not even all of them, but just the sort of live button, I believe it's called, and the buy button, which is they're on F1 and F2 if you use the keyboard. How to move around the map in terms of the different ways to select your sim. There are, I think, 3 ways to select your sim. Which sim you want to be controlling right now, that is, in your house, and then some stuff about options, and and then some basics of oh, hey, by the way, your character has all this information about their underlying simulation. Here's how you access that information. Hey, do this thing. Do you see that this is happening? Those sorts of things. So I think one of the last things you do in that tutorial is that you get one of your Sims gets a job through the newspaper. And then basically it says, okay, now you can go make your own house. You can use one of the houses provided. You can bulldoze a house and start fresh. Whatever you want to do, it's all up to you. And I decided to stick with the tutorial house and see if I could add very little to it and have it just keep going. And I will say it's not super fun to do because
it's
I think a lot
similar to what I did. I did an experiment in SimCity,
right. Yes, exactly.
Small towns.
Yeah,
so it's going to relate to one of our topics. So this is a really fascinating thing.
Yeah, for sure. So for me, I was like, well, I know from sort of historic interviews and things like that. I've seen Will Wright speak about this game, and I thought, knowing what I know about how he thinks about this game, why don't I just write a little story in my head about who these people are? They're Betty and Bob Newbie. They're just starting out. They get a tiny little house. It's well appointed but small, and they're not living on a lot. Only Betty's been able to find a job, and as a result, Bob has stepped up. He's doing all of the work around the house.
Love it.
And so I've just been kind of pushing that. And then when she comes home, they don't have a lot of stuff to do. So currently their sort of evening activity, where they connect and talk about her day, is that they sit and play chess on the back deck. And then he goes in and he makes dinner and serves it. And she just kind of sits and listens to the radio. They might dance a little bit in the kitchen. Then dinner is on the table. They eat. He cleans up. She goes and she might practice in front of the mirror a little bit or read a book because she wants to, improve her career prospects because she's the earner.
How much of this is you guiding it, and how much of it is automated?
This is all me guiding it.
Okay.
It's entirely me guiding it because I quickly found Bob's natural tendencies are he's not the cleanest guy. Can confirm.
When he came to my house, that's what happened too, by the way.
Yeah, right. He goes, well, and I can tell you why. We can get to that as well. The newbies live in a house with these other with the Pleasants, that are your family and whoever's in the other house. And these people have come by my house actually. One of the characters came by on the first day. I don't think I got their names, but I sort of like Betty went out and socialized because Bob's not super social. He likes chess, for example. So Betty was kind of conversing, and then one day, while Betty was at work, a woman in like this red dress came by.
Yeah, the Goths. Yeah, I have a story about them too. Yeah.
And he's like in the kitchen with, and she was like flirting with him and stuff. And I'm like, whoa. And he asked her to leave because that was really a bridge too far. Bob's really happy with Betty, and she's earning the bread. He hasn't been able to find a job, so nothing else has turned up on the newspaper. He looks, he's good at cooking and mechanics, and both of them are pretty good at logic with their chess playing. But so far nothing has really turned up. So.
Jeez. Yeah, you did some thinking on this.
I surprisingly, like I said, it's I did play quite a bit of The Sims on the PlayStation 2, but I didn't complete it, and B, it didn't make me itch to go play more of the Sim series. But diving into this one, it has a definite charm with some caveats and concerns, but like, I see why this became a cultural phenomenon at the time and continues to be today. So I get that. We'll talk about that a little bit too. But tell me how the Pleasants went, and we can discuss why Bob Newbie did what he did at your house.
Yeah, that's fun. I really hope that we have the fortitude to be able to tell stories like that every episode, because it's a sim. I guess a little bit like SimCity, though SimCity is kind of boring to talk about because they're like, oh, the prices of water or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
This is much more relatable, like you said. So anyway, or like Dwarf Fortress, I think was also one that was fun for stories.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah. So,
and certainly this game is a touchstone for Dwarf Fortress.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you are probably going to have to be the one to remember this, because this is one of the aspects of gaming I never do remember the details on. But I'm pretty sure we both went to his pretty infamous talk on this, where they talked about the AI, the way that they map the AI with the kind of like, I don't want to call it a heat map, but there was sort of like, what did he call it? Like areas of interest that would draw them around, and how they kind of mapped the isometric grid based on this sort of system. But,
we can talk about that later, but it's basically we'll probably in the future, because how the sim works is probably, it's going to take a lot of play for me to like go, oh, I see what they're doing. I mean, there's some things I know, and there's some things that definitely we went to talks about. In particular, we went to a talk in it's around 2006 or so, 2007. There was a leadership conference in south of San Francisco, and John Romero, as part of that, interviewed Will Wright.
Oh yeah.
And that's where I picked up the tidbit about Bungling Bay and how he raid on Bungling Bay, and how that started him off on this path that sort of not entirely ended with The Sims, because Spore was after this, and he was still doing this sort of thing. But The Sims was kind of from Bungling Bay what he was aimed at. And Spore kind of came later and had different influences. Anyway.
Yeah. 2000 was my first GDC, actually. So.
Yeah, this was that leadership conference. I don't know if you remember.
IGDA. Yeah. No, I remember. That was a good interview. Especially because it was John.
Yeah. John did a great job. Of course, he remembers everything too. So.
Yeah.
Good. I remember the first sim, and this is what he did on his first day. And 3 hours later, you're like, and now the second day, really? So,
yeah, it's an interesting person to be an interviewer. So I skipped the tutorial, didn't even know it existed. So I went, they just have that neighborhood as sort of like, which is kind of neat. The neighborhood as the front end. And so I explained who I chose, which comes with, the husband and wife and 2 kids. So you started off, and I chose the house and then began. And it's like, I barely played this back in the day too. So for all intents and purposes, I haven't played this game. So I really didn't know. I had a vague memory and all the sort of media around it, but I couldn't remember like how it actually worked and how much you had to do and what the goal is or whatever. So we'll talk about how they judge progress, I think, as we go, because I think it's a pretty important topic. But they're just standing on the lawn, the whole family, as the game starts, right? And I'm like,
this is the start of a horror movie.
yeah, it's so surreal. They're just standing on the lawn, the whole family, and then all of a sudden, like pretty quickly, the school bus arrives.
Oh, that's awesome.
We're still on the lawn. And then somebody throws a paper, or paper appears, or it comes out maybe out of the mailbox. And so
I also get the newspaper.
Mrs. Pleasant starts reading the newspaper while the kids get on the bus. Like, they haven't even entered the house. They get on the bus and they just are gone. I was like, okay, good. I don't have to worry about the kids for a while. But not long after that, before I've even gone into my own house, the Goths come over, which is the woman in the red dress you mentioned, and then the guy that's like in a tuxedo.
Yeah, he's the other one who came to my house.
Super fancy.
Yeah.
Like, they're dressed super fancy, and I know that they have a house in the neighborhood too, because I saw it on the front end. And they're just all talking on the lawn and you know, conversing, and I intentionally like had them talk to each other, and I think gained some friendship points or whatever the hell. And so, like, my experience, obviously I assume they have lived in the house before this moment started, but my experience is, you know, they've bought this house, which, by the way, I guess this was my choice, so it's not their fault, but, you know, two adults and two children. There's one bedroom with one single bed. So the house is already not equipped for the family.
It doesn't have a second floor, or?
No, no.
Wow,
it's a tiny house. Yeah, it's a tiny house.
So it's basically very similar to the house I'm starting in, probably.
I guess so, yeah. There's a kitchen slash basically a great room, kitchen and living room combo, a bedroom and a bathroom as it starts, and a back patio.
Oh, yeah, that's the same house I start with.
Oh, okay, so I chose the tutorial house by accident.
No, I don't mean you didn't choose the tutorial house. I think you chose
this equivalent size.
It's the same size as the tutorial house. Yeah.
Okay,
but maybe you did. I don't know. I didn't fiddle with that kind of. I was like, I'm doing this thing this week. So yeah.
Well, I immediately started adding to the house because I had money. I think I started with like $20,000 or something.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. So, because I was like, well, I don't have even enough beds for my two adults. So I started adding immediately. But the funny thing about it is, as I was doing all of this, and I ended up pausing a lot because I really like building in games. And so as soon as I started fiddling with customizing the house, that kind of like, I became obsessed with all the finicky pieces of that.
So you're saying a level designer.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Good point.
Immediately started customizing the level they were playing in.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Flooring. Yeah,
rings true.
Yeah. But the funny thing about it all is the sim was still happening, right?
Right.
And I didn't really understand how much I was going to need to maintain and how much they were going to do automatically. You explained a little bit there with their personality traits. But the Goths just stayed. So I'm like customizing and building the house. Everyone's like over there, and they're just like the Goths wouldn't go away. I mean, I could tell them to go away, but I wanted to see what they would do naturally. And so the entire day, the Goths are there, conversing. I think Mrs. Pleasance at one point makes dinner automatically. I didn't ask her to, but clearly nobody is cleaning up. Like, they won't do that automatically. So I'm having to force them to, there's just plates everywhere. Every time somebody uses the kitchen sink, it floods the living room. Mm-hmm. Like, why is that happening? Who is it that they're
because they're not good at it. They're not good at
but
whatever the thing is. Dinner. If you go into their abilities, it's like they're not good at that thing. So yeah.
But what is that thing? Water?
It's
usage.
It's probably mechanics or something. I'd have to go look. Like,
so
there's like six things. There's six or seven like skills, broad skill categories, and one's like logic, and one's like politics or speech or something like that. And there's different ways to level those things up. For example, if you have a bookcase. Yeah, if you have a bookcase and they spend time with the bookcase, you can opt to read for mechanics, read for cooking, or just read a book, which I think is for fun and for rest, maybe. Or comfort. comfort, I think,
Comfort,
because
yes.
they'll sit down while they read. So, which is funny. I only have the 2 chairs. I did because it was part of the tutorial. Like buy them a couch, like a love seat, and put it in their bedroom. And like I had them both reading from the thing, and then afterwards I sold the couch back for the exact same amount of money. I was like, wow, that's really gameable. Like you could literally like every day. Well, at 9:30 a.m. I buy the couch, and then and I have them read. And at 11:30 I sell it back. I get all my money back. And I can still like. There's some limits to what they're, because there's no degradation of items and things like that, as far as I can tell. That may be true of later versions, but it's like you bought a thing, you don't want it. I love that as a design choice because it's like feel free to experiment. Like they're totally in on this is an anthill.
It's a kind of a closed loop economy in that way. Yeah. And so it's just I'm still discovering like. So I didn't know the details of what you were saying, but it was funny to me that I now had to have this loop where every time somebody used the faucet, I had to have a cleanup crew come in, right? To maintain that stuff. But
Bob and Betty, whenever they take a shower, when they step out, they make a big mess on the floor.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. So and so the Goths just stuck around. We were all there during the day. I guess my 2 neither of them have a job because they were there, or maybe I don't know why they didn't go to work. I have to figure that out. And then eventually Mrs. Pleasance, makes dinner. And then I had, by that point, added on a dining room because there was no place to eat. So I was worried that they were just going to like eat on the floor or something. And they were starting to put things like dishes on the floor as it sounds like part of their learning, which is interesting as a side note. It's interesting that is one of the ultimate goals of the game to make. If you fill all the bars up for a sim, then you're kind of trying to make a superhuman who's good at everything, which is a very interesting commentary, I think, if that is something you can do. I assume people would strive to level up every bar. So that's kind of a side note we'll talk about later.
Yeah, I don't know if those degrade either. Yeah, we'll definitely have to be in a later part of the game to even understand those mechanics.
Yeah. And so, but then I had put a table on the back patio. I put a couch, a chair, a TV, and then I'd made a children's bedroom because I knew they were going to come home some point and they were going to need to sleep. So I had it there. And I put a double bed in the main bedroom just to prepare for what I assumed would be the incoming night where everyone's going to want to sleep. And then because I had put a dining room and a table on the back, it's just so weird. With the table on the back porch or on the back patio, she made dinner again automatically, and they went. The Pleasants went and ate that dinner separately from each other. One was like on the couch, and one was in the dining room. And then the Goths, who were still hanging around, went to eat by themselves on the back patio.
Yeah, that's wild.
This isn't even their house, and they're not conversing with their hosts. So I was like, what is happening? I was so confused. It's just so interesting to see what they're simulating and how these early, quote unquote, early knowledge sims, like how they act and like, what do I want them to do?
Right.
I guess I could just tell them to leave.
It's funny because Betty for me will often go because she'll come home and she'll be hungry. Actually, the first day, well, but technically, I guess the second day when she went off to her job, she didn't have time for breakfast because I didn't get her to bed early enough to like, when I woke her up, she wasn't happy. Timing's a big thing. And so like she came out, now I know like, okay, well, if she gets up by 6, she usually gets up a little earlier, so she can hop in the shower before Bob gets up. Cause Bob's going to go prepare breakfast so that there's breakfast on the table, when she's hungry. When she comes out of the shower, she gets out of the shower, then I make her brush her teeth, then she goes and gets a plate. And by the time all of that is done, like her ride shows up to bring her to work, very much like the bus. But frequently she will go to make dinner when she gets home because, like I said, she's hungry, and I'll stop her because, Bob knows he's got to carry his end here. Like, so Bob is like, no, honey, no, you've been working all day, here, put some Latin music on the radio and, all that. But already on the third day, in the middle of the day, Bob's pretty exhausted because he's been doing all this cleaning and he has to have his soaps. he puts on the TV and starts watching cartoons and stuff.
Amazing.
Yep.
Well, speaking of Bob, so I had
yeah, let's get to your Bob.
I had conversed. I mean, who knows? In the metaverse, it's your Bob who's come over. I don't know.
No, my Bob would never do this. He's too busy at home.
Yeah, well, I don't know what he does when she doesn't know what he does when she's gone. But so I had conversed with the Goths enough to where I could buy that they would stick around all day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Apparently, I think I come to find out later, their kid is at home alone. Because she eventually comes and joins them, but it's like late, like in the evening time. So they just came over and left her there. So I conversed with them enough to where I was like, okay, you're eating by yourself in our house, but we are friends now technically, so I guess it's okay. Bob, however, comes over out of the blue, knocks, doesn't converse with anybody, walks around, goes through the back door on the patio and just helps himself to dinner, sits down at the dining room table by himself and is just there, leaves trash everywhere, causes water to happen on the floor, doesn't seem to want to talk to anybody, and is basically just like squatting in the middle of this day while these two other couples are semi-interacting, and Bob is just like this freeloader that just kind of comes out of the blue but kind of acts like he's supposed to be there. Like he feels, to my perception of him, is Bob's very confident. Like he doesn't really care that we don't want him there. But and I didn't physically click the button to tell him to go away because that felt like too rude. I could have, because I definitely wanted to see what he'd do. But it was just so funny that their version of how to kind of create catalytic moments in the simulation is to have people just kind of randomly come over to your house. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, it's also possible that poor Bob in your neighborhood is not eating because
oh yeah, right,
they have no food and they have no money. Like the tutorial has no money with it. It's like
sad.
It's like they start with like $200 or something, less than $200, I think.
How would I even know that?
Most people would have read the second page of the manual where it says, "Oh, there's a tutorial in this game."
No. How would I know? Can I know that when he has come over without looking at his house?
Only once you see a relationship with him, or only once he becomes part of your house.
Talk to him. Yeah, but it is a little creepy that if he is hungry, that he's just comes over and starts.
Yeah, but if he just starts eating, it's because he's hungry. And we will talk about how the simulation works, because I do understand broadly how it works. Even with this, wow. I mean, I did play another game, but he is hungry, right? I mean, that's him coming over is not because he's hungry. It's not actually the case that off screen he's been getting hungry all this time and
looking for food, because he could have gone to the Goths, right? But then their daughter's there alone.
Well, he'd have to make maybe he did, Tim. You never know. He's not making his own food, right? Whatever. But that's not the case. They're just if they're not on screen, if they're not in the environment, they're not really being simulated. So they're just being pulled in as these are the people in your neighborhood, Tim. They're the people that you meet each day. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're creating connection points for you to do something, right? Like they're catalysts. Yeah.
Right.
Because they gotta have something happen.
Right.
I did. Speaking of TV, I did. So I think at some point it might have even been Bob, was like, the bubble looked like that they were bored or something. Mm-hmm. So I was like, well, I'll buy a TV. I had money, and I didn't realize you could change the channel. So it defaulted to a horror movie.
Yep. Mine did too. Yeah.
So loud, and
in Simlish.
Yeah, but also sounds like a very scary horror movie to me. And everyone is just sitting down. It's just so surreal. These couples who barely know each other, and then Bob, are just watching this horror movie of all things.
It's the Exorcism.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. Eventually, the kids come home from school, and the funny thing about them, which I guess is probably related to what I haven't built yet for them to do, because their version. So they got home. Maybe they're bored. they literally just start running through the streets. They're just like running. They get off the bus drives away, and they run into the street, and they're running in circles around the neighborhood until midnight. And then I forced them to go to bed because I was like, well, we have to go to bed. Everyone's tired. Mrs. Goth, the daughter, has come over, probably wondering, hey, mom and dad, where have you been all day? Why are you at these people's house? I've been alone. So she comes over, and then Mrs. Goth has the gall to come up to us and say, well, I've come to collect my child. It's time she needs to go to bed. I was like, you've been here all day. So it's like, it felt like she was mad that her daughter was here all day when it was the opposite. So it was such a funny moment. So they leave.
The funny thing, Tim, is I don't know if you realize this, but Will Wright does know George Lucas. Their family name is actually pronounced Goth.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, maybe it is Goth. Then.
That's a deep oath cut.
Oh, well, you missed it. I missed it then. So
you don't know about Hoth?
Goth. Oh, okay, right. Okay,
Goth versus Hoth. Yeah.
That is pretty deep and nuanced. Yes. Well done. All right. I give you that one now that you. Anyway,
now that I explained the humor.
Goth. I'll call them the Goths from now on. Yeah. And so the day basically ends with to be honest, I actually don't know when Bob left or what Bob did. He must have just kind of
wandered off. Oh, Betty's going to be coming home from her test subject job. Hopefully she brought some money so we can buy some food.
Yeah. So the Goths leave. They collect their child, quote unquote, and I call the kids in because I realized it was midnight. And I was like, everyone's super tired. But I made one calculated error, which I didn't know was a thing, of course, is when I put the double bed in the main bedroom, I put it right up against the wall.
So he can't enter it.
So Mrs. Pleasance gets in the bed, appropriately. And Mr. Pleasance, he's tired. He eventually gets into his pajamas. He has to go to the bathroom. But he's so tired. And then he's standing next to the bed watching her sleep because he can't get the other side of the bed. So, and you can't move.
So good.
Can't move occupied items. So I couldn't actually move the bed to get him in. So he goes to the bathroom, passes out from exhaustion after going pee in the bathroom. So he's sleeping on the floor of the bathroom. I eventually wake him up and force him to get up. And he decides on his own, which thank God he did, to go sleep on the couch.
Yes, and they can sleep on couches. Yeah, if they're big enough.
The day ends with him sleeping on the couch because he can't get into his own bed. I don't know if I could. I couldn't have had a more perfect first day.
That's a pretty good first day with the. I mean, you've seen everybody in the neighborhood. It's really funny because we played two different games. You played the build and let the sim run game. I played the don't build and micromanage the heck out of the Sims, right? And both are totally valid. Play how you want to play, and it is really open-ended in that way. I was constantly like, oh no, they'd go to do something and be like, no, that's not what you're going to do. You're going to go do this other thing. And so I was really tightly controlling. I had a day where he was, Bob was, I was like, oh, you know what? I've never watered the plants outside. I don't know if that's going to be a problem. So that's what Bob's going to do today. I clicked on every plant on the outside of the building and to water each and every one.
You're the taskmaster.
And I am, but he was I don't know if it was one of his meters was his fun meter was just dropping off the charts so fast that I was like, you know what? And then he put a goal in his list of things he was going to do. And I was like, you know what? Fair point, Bob, and I just closed all these other things. I didn't let him do I don't know what he wanted. Oh, he wanted to go play chess, I think. And I was like, no, let's not do that. Cause that's our thing we do with Betty, Bob. Come on.
Oh my God.
But that's when I was like that. So it's that's when I put on the TV and now Bob is like, I've got to have my soaps. I can't get through the day without my soaps. So I definitely I take the fact that I'm micromanaging it from the stories I'm telling about them, and I'm not letting the stories just emerge. Which I'm not going to spend a lot more time on the tutorial house, but I just thought it was funny that we're both getting different types of humor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of authoring the humor. This is the stuff that makes me laugh. Like, oh no, Bob, come on, Bob. You can't play chess. It's 2 PM. You're just going to sit out and play yourself on the back. You're going to get sunburned. This is not a good look for you, Bob. You should go in, okay, watch a little TV. And I find that funny.
How flexible it is. Yeah. But it is. I mean, I think we'd always heard the funny stories that I assumed people were really kind of orchestrating. But now that I'm playing it, it's like, this is just kind of a comedy factory.
Yeah.
We talked about in pre-show. It's like,
and we talked about it in Far Cry 2 as like, that's a game that makes, funny stories happen, or emerging crazy stories happen.
Yeah.
But that's the same thing is true here. And it comes from the same origin, which is like deep simulation that has a lot of friction. With the other systems.
Yep, excuse me. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. So it's like we've got, you've got like, oh, I've got all these, needs, let's say, on the Maslow's hierarchy or whatever. Like I have all these needs, and then I have all these devices around me that satisfy part of those needs. But of course, while those needs are being satisfied, other ones are not. There's no like perfect, there's no like orgasmatron or whatever in Woody Allen's Sleeper. It's like, no, there's like, yeah, you can spend some time with the TV, but you're just sitting there watching the TV. Meanwhile, your bladder's filling up, you're getting hungry, your energy is going down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, and your socializing is, draining away as well. So it's like when the Goths come over, like everybody wants to talk to the Goths, because they're a source of being socialized, and it's like they really pick the right number of things that you're spinning the plates always of like, I should really let this go. Yeah.
It feels like almost like a strategy game in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I also sent you a link for a strategy guide in case that's something you're interested in.
I saw that. Yeah. And I probably will look at both,
later,
episode or two in. Yeah.
Cool.
And I just looked at one of my notes I wrote down before I knew who Bob Newbie was, because you don't know their name, I think, until you talk to them or something or become friends. I just have a note that says, where is it? Some dude got water everywhere. It's like,
Bob. Yeah. He needs somebody to watch over him, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, he needs I need Brett in my game to keep handle on Bob, because he's a loose cannon.
Yeah.
But I could not get over the fact that Mrs. Goth like read me the riot act for coming to get her child when she left her child alone all day.
Oh, it's so good.
The child came over to find her. It was just such a weird, funny, just fun chain reaction of things, and letting them play out, like you said, for me was really interesting. And then trying to build, when you build, the game pauses, but I was trying to build around this chaos as I was going.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Wallpapering and stuff to see, what they would do with it. Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I can definitely see, I mean, it has that sort of DNA from The Sims, or rather from SimCity, of like the layout, placement, and like,
oh my God, yeah.
I don't want to make it too far from, places I want there to be a bathroom nearby, at all times, so that they don't have to go too far to satisfy, or, they can get quickly to the kitchen. So you need to make sure there's enough doors and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like I totally see the like satisfying the simulation conditions as active like building, but also leaving room for them to, do what they're going to do. So
there was one point. So the first table that I put, table and chairs I put, was actually on the back patio. And there's a door and the back patio is off of the main bedroom, and there's a door from the kitchen to the main bedroom. So I assumed they would go through the bedroom to get to the back patio.
Bad assumption.
But they did not. And I guess that's because that's not, a good form to go through someone's bedroom, I guess.
Well, yeah. Who knows if that's
some
really what it's
weird
about.
behavior going. So they would actually go out the front door,
out
walk
the front door
all
and
the way
around
the house,
Yeah.
and then go and sit and eat on the back patio that way. So I was like, well, I got to solve that. So I added a door. I figured out what to do. I added a different door, but it's just interesting to it's like a little bit like SimCity in that way, or Populous, or something where you're trying to. There's some magic happening behind the scenes that is guiding them to do a certain thing, and you're like, well, what do I need to do to fix that problem?
Yeah, it's likely to me that it's more like, pathfinding works on costs, like how much does it cost to, so like, costing going from one square to another next to it is, cost one, like that's cheap. Going through doors is probably expensive, and so it chose the route that was one door, because going through one door with the additional path length of like lots of little one squares was cheaper than going through two doors.
Could be.
Yeah. Something like that. Or even just like, as soon as I got into and had a second door, they're like, well, I would prefer to spend more time on the other path to see if I can get there, which is pretty easy to do with like a flood fill out or something like that. So,
well, I could also see, I mean, I made this up in my head, but yeah, that could be it, because the path was much further to go around.
But it might also do some grouping of like, oh, I have to go through two rooms, right? Because I go through two doors. And if I go out one door, then I'm just in this one big room called outside, right? And maybe that's, like moving inside a room is effectively free, right, to the algorithm. Could also be that. So
I was kind of wondering too, though, and hoping that perhaps bedrooms for guests were maybe more.
Yeah, we'll experiment. Like, we'll sort of discover.
De-emphasis on that.
Yeah.
But my solution ended up being, because the way I had built the dining room was adjacent to the back patio, so I basically just put a door through the wall in the dining room to go to the back patio, so they could go from the kitchen to the dining room to the back patio. And they did that instead of going all the way around.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, so, maybe it is something about the spaces, like certain types of spaces have a different weight because of their because of what's in them, basically, because that's all you really know. Like, it doesn't know bedroom. What it knows is room that has a bed in it. If you know what I mean. Like, it's not the same thing.
Could be the bed puts off
puts a big negative
space on it. Yeah, where it dissuades you from going them.
Yeah,
if it's not your bed, basically,
right,
or something. Yeah.
Right, something like that.
It's super interesting to hypothesize about how.
Oh, I love reverse engineering these sorts of things. I just love it. I mean, I love simulations. I mean, I don't love them to play, but I love the idea of simulations, and I love to think about how they work or how I would simulate something as an engineer. It's just like, that's what we do, right? I mean, so it's like, we think about, okay, well, what kind of algorithm? So, I mean, I'm troubleshooting the algorithms here with you. Like, well, it could be this, or, oh yeah, it could be that. Oh, I didn't know. More information. Oh yeah, that does seem more natural. Like, maybe they're doing this, and that's, that's catnip to a gameplay programmer anyway. So, well, that is, let's kind of put a pin in it there. Next week we will further regale you with tales of newbies, Goths, and pleasants, or pleasances. I'm not sure if it's pleasants or pleasant. And we'll get to that. I look forward to that. We'll see. I don't know if this is going to be a 3 or 4 episode series. I think there's quite a lot in this game to explore. And I think there are a lot of interesting stories that come out of it. We kind of skipped some stuff that I want to come back to. So we have plenty to talk about. But I would like to at least read the one email. A couple fun things in it. So go ahead and do that. This was sent to devgameclub@gmail.com.
Okay. Quick thanks is the subject from Dave K. G'day, Brett and Tim. I've been touched on. It's been touched on before, but I'd like to send a quick note of thanks that you guys keep it clean on the podcast, so I have no issues with my kids overhearing any of it. Hi, kids. Hi, Dave's kids. They may be bored. Well, that's for sure. But at least they aren't learning new naughty words. Cheers, Dave K. P.S. The bonus Final Fantasy Tactics content on the end of the mailbag episode worked exactly as intended with me. Why are they telling me where to find them on Twitter? Find them on Twitter. The episode has ages to go, I was asking myself, and was convinced my Apple Podcast app was playing up until all was revealed toward the end. So, yes, that was Brett's genius idea. And I think also Brett's genius idea to keep things clean. So good on you.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I had to really shut him down in the early years. He was saying "aw geez" all the time, which is a really naughty word in Finnish. I'm kidding. I have no idea. You actually moderated yourself on "aw geez," but it was largely because I started counting them. So
to be honest,
we had an "aw geez" meter.
Yeah, it's funny that you maybe subconsciously, but to be honest, the fact, if you were telling me right now that I'm not saying "aw geez" anymore, I would not be aware of it. Not like you used to. I would not. I don't know how I stopped or do it less. And maybe it was subconscious because you were drawing attention to it.
No, it was. I
never made a concerted effort.
You said it to me. I got to stop saying "aw geez." Maybe because I sent you a T-shirt that said "aw geez" on it. But
yeah.
So that was his. I don't know, holiday gift some years ago. I was like, it was so good. Because the counts were really outrageous. Anyway, thanks, Dave K. For your nice email. Appreciate it. Yeah, we had fun with we kind of were workshopping. We should recut the podcast so that this comes at the end. It was really, really fun. So it was fun to do, and I love the idea of somebody out there being like, "Wait a minute, it's been an hour or whatever, 40 minutes, and it says there's another 30 minutes to go," but
people out there, they're like, "Oh, wait, I stopped listening at that point."
Right. Yeah. There's probably some people out there who are like, I don't really listen to the email. I'm just going to skip. So, for those of you who do that, there's a sizable chunk of podcasts that you missed about Final Fantasy Tactics. Anyway, thanks for that. We also love to get your reviews. I'm subscribed to all the places for the iOS ones anyway. So if you put it in anywhere else, just let us know. Send us an email, something like that. That email again is devgameclub@gmail.com. We have a website at devgameclub.com. We are on Twitter, Threads, and Instagram at devgameclub. And my co-host here is twitching at twitch.tv/
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end, and I'm about to do that.
I was going to see you're going to dive into Gao some more. I gather for Final Fantasy VI. I
think Gao is as good as I'm going to get him for now until the big break happens.
Gotcha. The world of ruin.
So now I'm going to get back on basically on the main story path.
Cool.
That I have my party is forming nicely.
Excellent. We also have a fan-run Discord. There is a link in the show notes. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast Aaron Evers, and our logo, that Discord, our merch store, lots of things are by Mark Garcia. Have fun watching your bladder meter this week, and good night.
Speaking of which, good night.